Chancellor, Venerable Chancellor, and members of this congregation, I wish to invite our guest speaker to deliver the ceremonial graduation speech by reading his citation. He is none other than Professor Emeritus Saroj Jayasinghe, MBBS Colombo, MD Colombo, MRCP UK, MD Bristol, and PhD Colombo. Emeritus Professor of Medicine, Clinical Medicine, University of Colombo, and a consultant physician and a consultant to the Sabaragamuwa University at present. He is a fellow of the Ceylon College of Physicians, Royal College of Physicians, London, and the National Academy of Sciences of Sri Lanka. He was the first Director of Medical Education in our country and played a leading role in curriculum reforms and was appointed founder head of the Department of Medical Humanities for the first time in the University of Sri Lanka, Colombo, and first in Sri Lanka. His research interests include kindness in education, health effects of meditation, and systems science. Thank you, Professor Jayasinghe, for gracing this occasion, and the floor is yours.
Colombo Vishwavidyalaya Kulapati Swamin Wahansa, Vice Chancellor, Deans, Heads of Departments, distinguished academic staff members, and administrative staff, graduating students, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting and granting me this honor to speak to the graduates of the Bachelor of Education and Bachelor of Labor Education at their ceremonial graduation. Students, my heartfelt congratulations to all of you. You are here today, we are here today to celebrate your achievements, to inspire you and to wish you the very best in all your future endeavors. You will be educating the future of our beloved Sri Lanka. I thought I will take this opportunity to share with you the role you could play to make our future, Sri Lanka's future, more peaceful, less competitive, and based more on compassion. Towards this, I will give you scientific evidence that humans have inherent goodness in them. And as teachers, you should promote the future generations so that you promote their goodness and move them away from violence. So you have a unique role to play. Next slide, please, yes. You have a unique role to play. We tend to think of humans as violent, as a violent species, and civilization is making them less violent. සත්ව විශේෂයක් වශයෙන් අපි ප්‍රචණ්ඩ සත්ව විශේෂයක් කියලා තමයි අපිට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ඉතිහාසයෙන් බැලුවහම. නමුත් if you look at the scientific evidence, humans are a cooperative species. They are social animals. Mass-scale violence is relatively a new feature. So previously, though we thought that we are violent as a species, actually, if you look at it, humans are a peaceful species. And we have won and become like this because we have been cooperating with each other. Next slide, please. And this is argued in 2 books, and I urge you as teachers, you must read at least 20 to 30 books per year. If you don't read, your students will not read. So there have been two views. One is that we are violent, and the other is that we are peaceful. And you will realize that most religions will say that we are peaceful. Next slide, please. So over the next few minutes, I will share with you biological evidence and how we socialize to violence and the role you have to play. ජීව විද්‍යාත්මක සාක්ෂි පමණක් නෙමෙයි ප්‍රචණ්ඩත්වයට අපි නැඹුරු වෙන්නේ කෙසේද අනිත් අතින් බලනකොට ගුරුවරුන්ගේ භූමිකාව කුමක්ද? Next slide, please. Yes. Now, when you look at the biological evidence, even children as small as 6 months, they can't speak. At 6 months, they want to be fair. So there are experiments they have done using images where they watch children, how they behave when certain things are distributed fairly or unfairly, and you look at the response of the infant, 6 months to 12 months. You find that infants and small children, in fact, cooperate. They don't compete. If you have children, you would have seen. Only when they become big and get your influence or influence of others, the adults, that they become competitive. Otherwise, children, if you leave children alone, they cooperate. They are peaceful. So this has shown, and several other experiments have shown, that our brain is in fact hardwired to cooperate. Our brain has been hardwired to be friendly, to cooperate. Next slide, please. Yes, so these are two examples of references from the scientific literature, and children as small as 6 months prefer people who help them, and children as small as 18 months tend to help each other. So how is it that our societies are so violent? What's the reason? Next slide, please. So these peaceful infants and children socialize to violence. They learn to be violent. They learn to be violent. This can be violence at home. This can be violence at school. This can be in the community, in the neighborhood, the media, the friends they have. And the end of the day, we find we are living in a violent society. Violence tends to be common. Of course, the media will always show you violence because that's how they get their ratings up. So even if the real levels are low, you will get the idea that there is a lot of violence if you watch media too much. So science has shown us that children are good, infants are good, and they learn to be violent, what we call socialize into violence. Next slide, please. And there are three main areas. One is, if you encourage aggressive interaction, gahuwat gahapang. When the child comes home crying to the father saying that the neighbor has hit You should hit back. So you are teaching the child that you solve problems by violence. And as teachers, if you also shout and if you also hit, you are giving an example to the child. The example is that you solve problems by violence. Not by peaceful means, not by speaking, not by negotiation, but by violence. The other thing is, if you are a victim of violence, if you have been hit when you were a child, when you grow up also, you begin to hit and use violence on others. So that's another thing which happens. And the third thing is, of course, if you see violence, and that's where the media comes in. If you're all the time seeing violence, you will also learn to be violent. So these are three main areas that we identify scientifically how children become violent. So what can we do as teachers? Next slide, please. We have hope because there's a thing called Pygmalion effect. That is, if you tell the child, if you speak to the child is violent, you don't go and be violent to that child, but you say, I don't expect you to be violent. I know you are a good child. If you say that you expect good behavior, children also start behaving good. They behave nicely. And then the opposite is also true. If you lower their expectations and say, you are a violent fellow, you are useless, they will also become useless. So we know how infants are born. We know that we socialize to violence, and you will see the enormous influence you are going to have on the future generations. I will show you a small story. I don't know whether you can read it. Next slide, please. If you can read it, I will give you just 60 seconds. So this is a child of 6 years who was punished. And then after being punished, the child came home and told the father. The father also shouted. So very soon, you are seeing the effects I told you. You are seeing a victim, and you are seeing advice also on the wrong side. And very soon, the child was known as a Gorikarya, right? Troublemaker. And that's the effects I told you, Pygmalion and the other effects. So you become a Gorikarya. And then they develop into this subculture, a violent sort of groups, gangs, and how they end up. Next slide, please. So, in this final slide, I want you to reflect. You have a major role in making our nation peaceful. You should never use violence. You should use positive reinforcements rather than punishment at home as well as in schools. You must promote peace, harmony, and cooperation, and not only competition and individuality. The science is there, the scientific evidence is there for that. And also, you must have the expectations of encouraging your future generations of students to be better human beings, more compassionate and more cooperative. Final slide, please. May you be the lamp that lights the lamps of peace in our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would request Chancellor Venerable Sir to give this token of appreciation to Professor Saroj Jayasinghe.